Welcome to Gluware Intent 19. I am Ethan Banks of the Packet Pushers, and with me is Greg Ferro, seated there on the platform. Drew Conry Murray is here. You know their voices from Network Break and other of our podcasts in our series. Robin Young, who would have greeted you on the way in, she made this whole event possible. So if you've never met Robin, because she does a lot of Packet Pushers things behind the scenes, give her your thanks for the event today, because without her it would not have happened. Okay, let's go back in time for a little bit here. Back in 2010, we Packet Pushers people, we started talking about networking and publishing these podcasts about networking. As it happened, it was at a time when networking was changing. Like nothing had happened in networking for decades. It was really a stagnant world. And then all of a sudden, again, we just showed up and happened to start recording at about the right time. Ethernet fabric starts showing up, and software-defined networking with OpenFlow and centralized controllers start showing up. And ooh, that was a thing that we were looking at that and going, this could change everything. And it really didn't. It really didn't work out that way at all. What we had happen with software-defined was we ended up with this scenario where all these special point products started cropping up as vendors are trying to figure out, I don't know how to monetize this thing exactly, but here's a solution, that'll work. And so software-defined didn't change everything like we thought it was going to, but it has inserted itself into our lives as networkers and as network engineers very heavily. So that, in a nutshell, actually is almost the last 10 years and brings us, in a way, up to what we've got in 2019. Complicated networks. We have a lot of things going on. All the stuff we used to have, all that legacy infrastructure is still there, and we got these other new solutions as well that are solving certain problems for our businesses. And so from a network engineering perspective, what are we dealing with? All of this stuff, and it's complicated and it's hard to deal with. We've got developers trying to push apps out into the network very quickly. We're trying to make the network do what it's supposed to do in a very quick way and struggling with errors and so on. If we were to look at podcast statistics, if we were to look at a whole Packet Pushers library and look at stats, the most downloaded shows that we have in our library are about automation, they're about orchestration, and they're about, lately, intent-based networking. Okay, now we're here. Now we're at Gluware Intent 19 to have some conversations about automation, to have some conversations about intent-based networking, and find out what people who are using the Gluware solution are really doing. Why Gluware? Because they have a solution that you can use no matter where you're at in your automation journey, because we're all on a journey in IT somehow. We're all on a journey. So wherever you are in your IT automation journey, Gluware can fit. And Gluware has also been deployed into some very substantial customers, so they're doing actual automation and actual intent-based networking, and we're going to talk about some of those use cases today. That's why we're here. Some really cool customers and use case stories are going to be in the room today. So what are we going to cover? What's the format for the day? We are going to be covering some use cases. We're going to be seeing some demos. We are going to record a live podcast towards the end of the afternoon with customers and have that, Packet Pusher style conversation where we ask real questions from people that are doing real work and get some real answers. So to open the event today, we've got Greg Ferro, co-founder of Packet Pushers. You know him, you love him. And Jeff Gray, CEO of Gluware. If you don't know him, hey, you're about to meet him as these guys set the stage for us. We're going to discuss the state of automation and intent-based. So Greg and Jeff.
Thank you. Welcome to Tech Bytes, a short, sharp, sponsored conversation on new and emerging ideas in technology. Today's show is sponsored by Gluware and recorded live at Intent 19 in New York, a special live event with our partners. With me is Jeff Gray, CEO of Gluware. Now, we're going to go deeper into the ideas in this little Tech Byte, behind the ideas of intent engineering and a pathway to intelligent networking that Gluware has built. Now, we've heard a lot about intent networking over the past 5 years, where he sort of came out of the SDN type of resolution. But what interests me most about Gluware's approach is that you can start small with small a, automation, right? And this is my point of view. Most of the people who are doing intent sort of demand that you go out there and pave over your existing network, wipe it all out, buy new hardware, start from scratch. But Gluware says, no. Our starting point is start with what you've got, start some automation and go forward. And you move through to orchestration, then you move to policy networking, and then you move to intent or intelligent engineering. And the technology that Gluware uses under the hood is really interesting. It's got models, it's got policy, and piles of buzzwords to get the job done. And we'll go into those in end of the day. So Jeff, let's launch straight into the discussion here. What is Gluware? Give me the elevator pitch, and then we'll scratch a bit deeper on the surface.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks to our online audience. Thanks to our customers, Merck and Terracon, for being here, and all of you that showed up, and special thanks to Packet Pushers. So Gluware is leading the concept of intelligent network automation. And there's two components to that. There's the concept, which we're pioneering, which is intent engineering, which means that we can actually derive intent from the networks that exist and be able to build automation on top of what is already there. That our customers are smarter than we are. Those networks have been working for a long time, but customers are looking for us to be able to build automation on top of the networks that exist and create intent from those networks. The second piece is our intelligent orchestration engine. So that is how the concept of intent engineering is consumed, and that is our product, and we'll be going through that the rest of the day.
Right.
There's a huge amount of intellectual property that's been created, $47 million of engineering dollars, and what it allows for are quick wins, low-hanging fruit. So there's a concept of being able to go and do dynamic inventory and understand exactly what is out there. Many customers don't know that today, even in the financial world.
So what you're talking about there is inventory. So one of the simpler challenges of automation is, what do I have? How do I discover something and then create a database of what I've got? Model numbers, part numbers, line cards.
Exactly. Operating systems, understanding if there's vulnerabilities, are there any P-certs that are out there that everyone used to ignore now? People really care. But understanding what's out there. Second, config, drift, and audit. Did anything change? Did anyone fat finger something? Did anyone leave a vulnerability in a config? Being able to audit and have PCI, SOX, all types of other compliance, and be able to have a real-time understanding and essentially do a Google search for your network on the fly. Understand what should be there, what shouldn't be there. The third component is OS upgrade. As I spoke about, there are a lot of vulnerabilities, so how do you reliably bring operating systems up to the correct state and do a lot of pre-checks and post-checks and make sure you're not going to create a lot of failures.
But see, OS upgrade is more than just like, conft, TFTPD, upload an image, reboot. You have to decide what image you're going to use. So there's a whole decision process that you can't easily do, which is just, you say like, oh, let's just do an OS upgrade. And I think the immediate reaction is to go like, that's not really hard. I just, get the image. But you've actually got to say, what device, is this the right image? What are the bugs in that image? How do I load it? Is this image going to work with this configuration? I've got to take a backup of the config before I start. There's so much more to it when you start to dig into it.
Absolutely, Greg. And there's a lot of defense mechanisms that have been built in, and it's not that simple of a problem, actually, right? This is where the declarative modeling nature comes in, so you can check what's there, you can run a bunch of pre-checks, you can go and make sure that it is the correct image, be able to take multiple steps, not just load an image and hope that it works like a load and pray, and then be able to do post checks. And if there's any bugs, known bugs, be able to alert flag those, and then say, okay, I need to deal with those before we go ahead and schedule that reboot.
Okay, so as part of this event, we're going to do some more, part of the Intent 19 event that we've partnered with you to deliver. We're going to do a bunch of sessions on things, but one of the things that we took from the earlier sessions is, one of your customers is telling me they've got a 98% reduction in time to make changes. They've got 1.5 hours versus 6 months, or 99% of global network changes in less than 24 hours, or monthly OS patching. The question is not, I'll take those numbers as a given, because if you're interested in hearing more about them, check out the show notes and then find the link to the thing that you want. The question is, how do you do that? What is the key technology about that makes that possible to do that?
Right, so that would be double-clicking on the concept of intent engineering and then our intelligent orchestration engine. And so, as I mentioned, we didn't really have a good name for it. Our customers have been saying, hey, we've got the secret sauce, but we never really had a good name for it. And then the concept of intent engineering came out, and the typical definition of intent-based is trying to figure out high-level intent, business intent, and then churning out and spitting out configs. Well, that is really a redeploy type of model. That's a greenfield model. That's a start from scratch model. That's a new
a lot of vendors
island.
force you into a configuration. Like, there are vendors out there who say you've got to throw out all your existing switches, buy new ones, and then put them in this way. Like, this is your new campus, this is your new data center, this is your new WAN, and you can't do it any way but the way that we let you do it. Whereas Gluware is more saying we can do the same thing. But Is that, like, what's the technology that's in there that does that? Are you modeling? Are you using artificial intelligence? Are you using, like, elven magic? I don't know, whatever.
A little bit of elven magic, I guess. So I mean, this is the core IP of the company, right?
Yeah.
It's being able to go out and ingest any running config across currently 19 vendor operating systems and growing, and be able to take those monolithic configs and break them up into functional feature blocks, and be able to create models, abstract models, create a digital twin of the network.
Yeah, well, every router effectively has an interface, right, with an IP address on it. So you can model that piece of it. And then I guess you can just start putting those bits of model together until you build up a model of every possible device.
Well, I mean, there's the platform maps, as we call it.
Yeah.
So that's abstracting away from every single vendor type or device type. But then there's all the features and how they connect together. You'll see later in the demos of how all these things mesh together, almost like a chemical or a DNA model, if you will. And then from there, we can start to build policies.
Right.
And on top of policies, now you can deliver workflows and business intent. So we're actually doing exactly the inverse of intent-based. It's almost like based intent.
Yep.
So that's why we're calling it intent engineering. And you have already created fantastic networks that work, serving specific business purposes. Now it's a matter of creating agility within them, and that's what we can do. Preserve your network engineering and then build up from there.
Yeah, so I don't have to start changing my network to start with Gluware to do automation. I can start with automation, then go to orchestration, and then go on. Because the way I see it is this, I see networking as like this, or intent or automation or orchestration as this 5-layer model. Today we have these networks which are independent. We have routing protocols and CLIs, and you go off and do your thing. And the next step is you do some automation. But you move down the automation path, and suddenly you realize a year into it, you've got, hundreds of Ansible playbooks, and you've got Python scripts gluing them together. You've got a MySQL database out here, and you've got some Git where you're putting in you're pushing your configs, and then you've got some Prometheus and some Grafana, and then you go, well, I need an orchestration platform. And now all of a sudden the orchestration platform takes some of that work off you, and you can take the developers, and they're starting to work on the orchestration piece. And then you realize that your orchestration really doesn't, it just runs your old automations in sequence. It doesn't move the needle to where you want to be, which is intent-based networking, which is I want to configure this IP address and propagate it across the network. Now, whether that's BGP or static routes or injected via some sort of overlay network, you don't care. You just want it to happen. And there's this hierarchy of life cycle that when I talk to people, they start off with automation and then they realize it didn't work as well as they thought it would. Then they move to orchestration and then they move to intent. And then someday in the future, there'll be this intelligent thing where most of what the scut work, the toil, goes away and is replaced. Now that you fit into most of those, you sort of span across.
We do, and with that evolution, that journey that you spoke about,
Yeah.
I think what's most important now that we have the intent engineering and we can actually take what you've built and be able to model that and abstract it, then we've got this intelligent orchestration engine. And the key point here is that instead of like an analog phone, it's really like a high resolution MRI. And one of the key things that customers have seen when they've gotten in is it's not only determines exactly the order of every single line, but even the order of every single character in every single config and how everything rolls up together. And so it's this high resolution, insights, if you will, that now allows you to go and take actions throughout the network at scale and safe and predictable, right? It's extremely reliable. In fact, one of our customers that was on stage with us last week at ONU, their goal is a 0% defect rate. And they said that on stage in front of everyone. For us, that's a very big deal.
So that sounds a bit woo-woo. So how do you do that? How do you detect defects when today all we can do is configure them and then find them in our test network, sometimes called a production environment?
So that's fair enough. Now on the OS upgrade piece, that's a bit of a different story, right? But if that network is in existence, and you've tested the change and you're looking to reliably place that change across the network at scale, that's where the verification, the validation engine it's actually having a two-way dialogue with every single node and ensures that configuration is adapted into the state that you want to be there.
Now, that's because Gluware builds a twin of the network. You actually build a model of the network up in your software platform, and then when you go to write back, you're actually looking for configuration drift. If the OS update if you update the OS, then the config changes. You're going to go, hang on, is that what I'm expecting to see? You should know if the OS update is going to change the writing of the configuration order or something like that.
That's correct, and you'll see that in the compare engine, the demos that will be done later today.
All right. So Kip, because we're doing this live event, there's a whole bunch of demos associated with this event. You can hit up our YouTube channel and you can see the demos where they're actually going to show this OS drift. Kind of cool, because there's a whole bunch of times when configuration drift happens, and it can definitely screw an OS update either before or after, because if after the update it sometimes changes out, and that discovery problem. I think the other issue here with Gluware is that you can actually start small and grow big. So I talked about how I have this taxonomy idea of automation, orchestration, intent, and then intelligent. And one of the things that when I talk to your customers, because part of preparing for the event, we were chatting to customers like Merck and MasterCard and Terracon, and they're saying they just start off with some simple automations and then snowball. And that means, and the thing that I think, particularly when we're talking to Sal from Merck, is he's saying his existing people don't need to change too much to get started. Is that fair?
That's very
Like,
fair.
it sounds unusual. Like, it's sort of like too good to be true. I can just keep going the way I am and just add this on top, and that's not what anybody else is doing.
Well, the light bulb went on when there was a problem when Merck had an issue with some of the NotPetya ransomware that happened, and they came to us and said, "Can you automate our existing network?" And frankly, at that time, we had to say no. And we were part of the whole intent-based, right? Redeploy your network and create a new vendor island. It was a tough place to be. It's tough for customers to be able to do that. So it was a huge challenge. Our team, fortunately, had a major breakthrough. And this is where it's actually ingesting all the running configs. And it's actually coding behind the scenes on the fly. So it's doing the coding, right? It just means that all of the network engineers don't have to try and replicate their entire network.
So then
and write
you
Python
don't need to
scripts.
manually create Ansible playbooks or Python scripts. You're kind of dynamically generating all that for us.
That's correct. I mean, we can play nicely with a manager of managers and Ansible and Python and all that to be able to make calls to Gluware. It's just the heavy lifting when it comes to, let's say, 1,000 or 15,000 devices of changing QoS in a hierarchical model. That's pretty tough to do in scripting.
But
right?
this works for VPNs just as much as it does for routers as it does for data center switching.
All across the board. Anything that's a network device has a two-way interface, we can talk to and automate.
What about public cloud? What about Azure, AWS?
100%. In fact, we have a partnership now with Microsoft, given the benefit that happened with Merck, where we sped them to the cloud in record time, instead of what would have taken somewhere between 6 months to 2+ years to manually change their network. They were able to onboard everything themselves and speed to Microsoft's Azure in about a month and a half. So, any type of virtual device, it doesn't matter if it's physical, virtual, public cloud, private, as long as it's a networking device, then we can speak to it.
So really there's a fundamental difference here between what you're doing and what other vendors are doing. Other vendors are sort of saying, I want to have policy, but I need to control what's underneath as well. Whereas what Gluware is doing is saying, I'll take whatever's underneath, run it through my engine, my policy engine or my modeling engine, abstract out the things that I want, and then I can reconstitute the network in any way that I see fit. That is, I can work with a brownfield as well as I can work with Azure as well as I can. Now, some part of that, there has to be something I need to do. I still have to do some automation work or some configuration work in Gluware, so my engineers still have to change. It's not like they can just keep doing CLI configurations. I need to change from CLI to Gluware in a way. Is that process traumatic?
I mean, you'll have to speak with our customers that are here, right, to keep me honest. But it does give them the ability to leverage the CLI that they know and love, and be able to ingest it. Now, that would be for a legacy architecture, but for any kind of modern architecture that's REST-based, then they will have to understand REST calls and be able to abstract in the same manner. So this is really about build on what you have with your current environment, because that's the difficult thing. That can actually speed customers to adopting more modern architectures.
Yeah, because you've done demos with us where you've actually used your system to pull the configuration out of the box, make a change in the policy engine, and then you spit out the CLI so I can review it before I press play, before it executes.
Yes.
So you're not abandoning the CLI, you're making the most of it.
Yes.
As much, but you're saying it doesn't matter whether it's CLI or REST or gRPC or some configuration API, because it's all the same, because you've got this modeling thing in the middle that says, I want to do this, and you just have to translate the model into, how do I configure it for Juniper or Arista or whoever it is? You can ingest all of those.
Absolutely, Greg. And what it doesn't do is go out and blow the whole config off in a block and try to reboot. We call that load and pray. This is about comparing what should be there, and it only changes the lines, whether it's REST or config, that should be changed. And that's where you get some of that high resolution capability. And I think the biggest thing here, Greg, is that there's a journey, and we mean a real journey, not a journey like out in 3 years or whatever. These are the things that actually exist, where you can do the inventory, then you can perform an audit, you can do the OS upgrade, and then you can start to write to the network. Right? So it's a nice transition from read to write, and then start making these changes throughout an entire network in a very safe and predictable manner. And so that is the journey, but what it does is it sets a beautiful way forward to start to put analytics and self-driving capability on.
Right.
And so the concept of trying to create this Uber brain, plug it in, and that doesn't work. That's the equivalent of making the entire United States highway and roads and everything like self-driving. That doesn't work. For me, I like dynamic cruise control. There's some self-parking. It's like use case driven self-driving capabilities.
Yeah.
And that's what's right
well,
there.
You can build them because you've got the modeling language. I can see that I could start to build my own situations or my own configuration transformations where I can say, I want the network to go from this to this. And so as a network engineer, I'm still configuring stuff with the knowledge that I've got. But at the end of the day, you're taking me away from, finger banging the keyboard and toiling away at the CLI like some sort of, savage. I've really had enough of the keyboard, to be fair. It has to be said.
So, in terms of benefits of some of the low-hanging fruit, right? When Merck needed to move to Microsoft Azure, as I mentioned, it was going to take a very long time to do this manually. We actually allowed them to do it in a month and a half. Now, every time they make a global QoS change, and they shared this live at Agenda 19 a couple months ago on stage, an hour and a half. And so it used to take 6 months, best case, to do it manually. Now it's an hour and a half, and the system just performs it. That's a big deal. They've saved a lot of money.
Now, the other part about this is that as the operating systems transform and change, and as the devices change, you can actually go in and say, I'm going to take this device out and replace it with this device, and you can calculate the configuration needed to copy the previous one.
That's correct.
So you can literally forklift out a device and just use Gluware to push the configuration back in because you know what the new device should look like to match the policy.
And this is where it could be virtual, right?
See, I like the idea of forklift upgrades because they're my favorite thing.
Is that serious?
No, not really. I was being totally sarcastic.
So the concept of being able to pull out and then move to any...
There's a salesman in the back of the room who's getting very excited, I'm sure.
So no, I appreciate that you're here and you say things like that, but that's part of we say brownfield, but it helps move to a modern architecture.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is a lot of times we don't think about how hard it would be to rotate a router at a site, but if you could just walk out there and then push the config to it, and the old config is translated automatically for me, it will be almost automatically. That's a little bit of elven magic right there. Then provided, but it's not a magic panacea. It's not elven magic. You do have to have trained Gluware system, not trained, but worked with the Gluware system to know what the new device looks like. You have to do some of that work yourself. It doesn't come for free, but most of the hard work is done for you.
I agree with that. And there are the changes that the enterprises need to make in network operations because we are forging new territory together, right? There used to be very small change control windows and the network wasn't set up for massive change. Now, for example, MasterCard on stage last week, their focus is 99% of any global network change in less than 24 hours, and just take off the throttle and just let it go. And that's based on the the predictability and the fact that it's safe and been tested. Monthly OS patching and 99.9%. Config drift. Only those customers that need to make a one-off change would be out of the gold standard. And then also, the vision that they shared is the pipeline that has zero human interaction. So after they built the system, then just let it run. And that's what we're looking to do as we move forward, this whole concept of self-operating. So really, really exciting times ahead.
So that wraps up this Tech Bite. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us, and thanks to Gluware for sponsoring this fine special event at 1019. We couldn't do this without you. Now, if you want to find out some more information, head on over to gluware.com, where you can find out lots of more information. Like any vendor website, it's awash in white papers and documentation that can help get you started. But there's particularly in this case, gluware.com/packetpushers, which is a landing page. There's some white papers and some videos there that we talked about during this show where you can find out. And there's a form which you can fill out so that a sales team can be right over to chat to you about what you want to know more about the product. If you want to follow Twitter, Gluware Inc., GLUWAREINC, and you can find out more about them. And that wraps up this Tech Bite. Thanks again. You can find this and many more fine free technical podcasts along with our community blog at packetpushers.net. Follow us on Twitter as @packetpushers. Find us on LinkedIn, like us on Facebook, and rate us on Apple Podcasts. And last but not least, remember that too much technology would never be enough.